Everyone, it's Blake here at Wrestling Reaction, and up next in our Royal Rumble prediction series, the Women's Royal Rumble match for 2024. We've already made our picks for the Men's Royal Rumble match and the Fatal 4-Way match for the Undisputed Universal Championship. Now on to the Women's match, which may be a little bit harder to call, and we'll talk about why here on Wrestling Reaction. All right, so the Women's Royal Rumble match, just like we did with the men's match, which, by the way, you can find that on the channel if you search for our 2024 Men's Rumble predictions. Just like we did there, we're going to go through kind of, some of the odds initially. If you look at some of the betting odds, which, again, you can find these in different places, there's an interesting group here, and we'll kind of talk about some of the favorites and the most likely options to actually be in the match. And the women's side, there are kind of some interesting and differing opinions in some scenarios when you look at some of these odds. Although the consensus seems to be that, just sort of like with the men's match, there seem to be two favorites that are ahead of the pack here, and that is Becky Lynch and Bayley, which would make sense because it seems there is a lot of momentum towards those two challenging for their respective women's championship on that particular brand, whether it's Raw or SmackDown. You have your champions in Rhea Ripley and Io Sky. And so it would make sense that those seem to be the two most likely challengers. So that's why the odds seem to suggest that they are the two favorites. But when you get beyond that on the odds, this is where things get interesting because there are a lot of different names, and some of them may not even be working for the company right now and may not even be in the match themselves. But there are some interesting ones out there, like a Jade Cargill, who we know is with WWE now, but she's yet to wrestle. And will this be the spot for them to bring her in and give her some shine in the Royal Rumble match? You could certainly see it because there's, less demands than there is in a full-on singles match and a high-profile, kind of spot at a big show like this. So they could certainly go that route, come in, give her kind of the Kane push, where she just comes in, throws a lot of people out, gives her the dominant spot and all that. That could be a possibility. Another name that you see on a lot of betting odds lists, which by the time you're watching this, you may already realize that she is not going to be in the Women's Royal Rumble match, and she's someone else we've talked about here on the channel in another recent video, and that is Mercedes Moné, who all reports suggest that she is likely headed to AEW with her debut possibly coming as soon as the homecoming edition of Dynamite at Daly's Place, which, again, if you're watching this after the fact, you'll know if she's there or if she isn't there. And what possibilities may still be on the table, but she is on some betting odds lists. So, coming out of nowhere, potentially winning the Royal Rumble, I see that as unlikely. But I am mentioning her because she is among, the list here of potential options based on some of the odds that are out there. Other names, that are potentially on the table, you see in a lot of places. Again, whether it's Damage Control, the other members, whether it is, again, I'm just going down the list here. There's Zoe Stark, there's Shayna Baszler, and all these others. But there's one we need to get to, I think, and that is Nia Jax, which I don't even, did we mention Bianca Belair? Obviously, she's a choice too. Well, we're actually going to talk about her more in just a second. But Nia Jax is someone that is also seen as one of the, top tier choices probably for this match. And, could she be a possibility to win it? Some others, this is where you start to get into the territory of like surprise entrance and all that. Could a Trish Stratus return for this match? Sure, she could. Roxanne Perez potentially coming from NXT. All those different options. Like, you never fully maybe know exactly who they're going to bring into some of those spots. I've even seen Ronda Rousey on some lists out there. That seems unlikely to me, but I'm just telling you what you look at from the betting odds, which don't really always mean anything, but it is at least interesting to look at some of these and see just all the names that are listed, because then you kind of realize, okay, this thing could get very interesting if a lot of these names wind up in this Royal Rumble match. Although, like I said, there seems to be a pretty clear-cut group that realistically has a chance to win the Women's Royal Rumble match. And again, because of who the champions are right now, Rhea Ripley and Io Sky, there's a lot of possibilities in terms of what you can do on both sides, really. Again, whether it's the Damage Control setup on the SmackDown side or someone else, Bianca Belair has kind of made it clear she is taking aim at Io Sky and all these other things. Or on the Raw women's side, you've got a lot of intrigue involving Becky Lynch, Nia Jax, and so forth. So it's a fun setup here on the women's side. And so that's going to lead us into our predictions. the 2024 Women's Royal Rumble match. And just like I did with the men, we're not going to start with our winner. We're going to start with a predicted Final Four. And again, I do these for fun. These are not, everything could change. I'm doing these 3 weeks out from the Rumble. There could be other entrants that are announced. There could be people that are not announced for it that don't wind up being in the Rumble. Maybe people are that we think are going to be, and they're not in it. So there's a lot of ways this thing could go. But let's start with my picks for the Final Four. And I know this one kind of feels, I feel like my men's predictions were pretty predictable, except for one maybe, because it did involve a return on that one. But you can check out that video to see what I'm talking about. But on this one, this feels like a pretty, I don't know, boring Final Four, I guess you could say. I'm not saying boring in terms of like the women stars that are in it, but maybe it's like, when you make predictions, you like to try to find something that's kind of out there and all that. This doesn't really feel the case, seem to be the case, because you look at my Final Four here. I've got Becky Lynch, Nia Jax, Bayley, Bianca Belair. I mean, those seem to be, to me, probably the 4 safest picks to win the thing. So I'm like, I couldn't really go outside the box. And if I did go outside the box to pick someone else and maybe put them in one of those spots, I would probably remove Bianca Belair. And I think that's where you would insert a Jade Cargill, again, depending on how, if they're like, hey, we want to give the monster push to Jade or something like that. That's something they could do. Or I don't know. Again, there's other options there. Maybe you go with a Kairi Sane or something, like, to again add the intrigue of the damage control element and all that. If she and Bayley are in the Final Four, maybe that's something where you're able to kind of tell an interesting story there. Maybe there's some kind of elimination, and ultimately that leads to a scenario that again builds after this match. That's a possibility. I think that's another one that's one to maybe watch in this. I mean, I'm looking elsewhere. I don't know. There's just not a lot of other predictable ones. Whether it's maybe it's a Naomi, right? Like maybe she returns and they give her, the push all the way to the end. That's also perhaps a possibility, because it does seem like there's a lot of momentum towards her making her return. And this would be the natural place to do it, right inside the Royal Rumble. And so they wanted to immediately bring her back, put her in a featured profile spot. They could do that by putting her, in the Final Four. But again, it's really hard beyond that to pick others to be in there, unless, like I said, maybe it's a Jade Cargill, maybe it's someone from NXT that winds up getting the push into that spot. But yeah, like it's fun to pick the Final Four, but as we know over the years, sometimes not really mean a whole lot to be in the Final Four. It's just, it's just part of the story to get to the final 2. And so I'm going to go with this one, though. I'm going to say it's Becky Lynch, Nia Jax, Bayley, Bianca Belair. Now, this is where I think things get interesting, because you've got a lot of possibilities here. Becky and Nia have had their feud going on, of course. There's ways to continue furthering that, and we've already seen Nia's made it clear, on the most recent episode of Raw, as I'm recording this, she makes it clear to Rhea Ripley. She wins the Royal Rumble. She's coming after her. So, that has been made clear. So you've got that storyline kind of plotted in with that. We know the story with Becky and Nia to this point. Bayley, again, there's lots of reasons why Bayley is an intriguing option, because of the damage control element with Io Sky holding the championship now. And then Bianca Belair, again, someone who has just seemingly continued to be in the title picture. And someone else who's being focused on, as a top tier star, and has also made it clear that she is taking aim at a women's world champion in Io Sky. So I think, again, maybe it's too predictable. This is very unlikely, I think, for this to be the Final Four, but these were the best options I saw out there without just kind of having a great feel on maybe who that outside the box pick. Like I said, I would maybe go with a Jade Cargill, Naomi, or Kairi Sane. That would probably be one of my 3 picks if I was going to, take one of them, insert them into the Final Four here. But I do feel like Becky Lynch, Nia Jax, Bayley seem to be pretty good bets to get there, because I just think that there's a lot you can do if that happens. And then, of course, it comes down to, well, who wins the match? Well, I don't think Nia Jax is going to win, but I do think there is still that scenario where Nia Jax is going to get a shot at Rhea Ripley. It just may not come via the Royal Rumble win going on to WrestleMania to do it. And so this is where I think you have the opportunity to have Becky Lynch sort of slay the giant, right? Because we've seen Nia beats Becky in the featured match on day 1 Raw. How can Becky get a revenge on her? How can she kind of further that and get the upper hand again? It's by eliminating Nia in the Royal Rumble. To me, that just seems like something that could write itself if that's the direction they're going to go. it just makes a lot of sense, is for Becky to ultimately, she lost the match, but she gets her revenge by eliminating Nia and taking away what Nia wants most, and that is a shot at the Raw Women's Championship and Rhea Ripley, which I think, though, she could still get that even before the Rumble, maybe it's Elimination Chamber. Again, because we know Rhea is going to be in a huge match there, given the fact that, location-wise in Australia, we know Rhea is going to be featured in a top spot. So they're going to need a big match for that. But so I think if you do that, again, to me, this comes down to picking Becky Lynch or Bayley. I think it's one of these two because they are, again, the most likely options seemingly to go on and challenge for the respective Women's World Championship on their brand. And I changed this because initially I had another pick, but I'm going to go with the idea that the winner is a first-time winner, and that would be Bayley winning the 2024 Women's Royal Rumble. I've seen people kind of say it. It's like, it's time. It's like, it's Bayley's time here. I think there's much more you can do with the Royal Rumble as a storyline device. If Bayley wins versus Becky, because it's pretty straightforward if Becky wins, right? You know the match, and we already seemingly think the match is going to be Becky versus Rhea Ripley. But this is an opportunity where if Bayley wins, you can really play this up from there, because then you've got the reaction from Damage Control. What does Bayley do in terms of the decision, the choices, all of that? And again, we all seemingly have a pretty good idea this is leading to Bayley versus Io Sky at WrestleMania 40. There's not a lot for me to kind of feel like that there's a better option at this point. I think that is the best option. So if you do that, Bayley can win. You can play up the suspense, who she chooses, how that plays into the story, the reactions, all that. So I just feel like Bayley is probably the best choice here. And again, it gives a good moment for Bayley to finally win a Royal Rumble. Becky's won a Rumble, Bianca's won a Rumble, Charlotte's won a Rumble, and so forth. So I think this would be a great kind of, opportunity to do that. And so I will go Bayley as my pick. Initially, I picked Becky Lynch, but I think there's a lot more you can do with a Bayley Royal Rumble win to get to WrestleMania 40. So I will pick Bayley as the winner of the 2024 Women's Royal Rumble. The odds makers, some of them seem to agree with that. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments who you're picking to win the 2024 Women's Royal Rumble. Also, who would your Final Four be? Maybe who are going to be some of the wild cards? Like I said, for me, that's, is there a Jade Cargill, Naomi? I mean, Mercedes Moné, if she's not with AEW by that point, which seems to be likely. Anyone else that you could see, an NXT call-up, someone like that. Let me know what you're thinking in terms of the surprises, the wild cards, all of that for your Women's Royal Rumble predictions. Always fun to hear what you guys think, and always appreciate you watching here at Wrestling Reaction. As we said, we're a new channel. Just got this thing started. We're doing a lot of videos, so I appreciate all the great feedback and conversation. So hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and we will have more Royal Rumble predictions on the way as we head towards that event here in a couple of weeks. So thanks again for watching, and we'll talk to you again here soon at Wrestling Reaction.